If petty offenders are quickly swept into prison, then obviously, no matter the decongestion approach, the prisons will continue to be full.
The conditions in the cells were terrible. Ventilation is very poor. And for those of us who have, asthma related diseases, I mean, some of us would die if we were ever locked in that cell.
One thing that we want to talk about as a foundation, which is troubling, is the non-custodial sentencing bill. It's been in Parliament since your tenure, I remember very well. And I really don't understand why the bill is still in Parliament when we obviously know the importance if that bill is passed into law. So it has created a situation where our prisons have become congested because if petty offenders are quickly swept into prison, then obviously, no matter the decongestion approach, the prisons will continue to be full. So we'd want to use your good offices to also drum home the need for that bill to be passed into law. Another troubling issue is the need also for government to appoint a chief inspector of prisons. In the UK and other jurisdictions, we have a chief inspector of prisons. The Attorney General's Department and other institutions are doing the monitoring to ensure that there is compliance in the way our prisons are handled. But because they are all under government, it becomes possible to do the naming and shaming. So if you have a chief inspector of prisons, in the UK, when the chief inspector of prisons is visiting, they do periodic visits. The UK government shakes, trembles actually, because of the report that will come out. So if we could have something like that, I think it will go a long way to help us. So we also want you to use your good offices. And one thing I have realized is that most of the people who come from the northern part of the country, if you go to the Nsawam Medium Security Prison, most of our brothers from the north are in prison because of the push and pull factors, which we are all aware. They come, and then there are non-existent jobs. Eventually, they get into criminal gangs and so on and so forth, and they are there. So, what can we do? What would your government do differently? I'm sure there've been a lot of interventions in the past, but I would want you to look at it critically, ensure that there are more jobs in the north, so that we don't have our brothers and sisters, obviously. So, if you look at media reportage, when there is a crime, if you look at the names, you have Muslim and Northern names usually there.
I had a very good prison services board chaired by the current General Superintendent of the Assemblies of God, Pastor Wengam, Reverend Wengam. And they invited me to visit Nsawam Prison. And what I saw there, if you say they had even cleaned up before I got there, then the conditions are even worse than I thought, you know. Um, After that, we had a big meeting with all the prisoners. And after that, I did that amnesty that gave amnesty to many of them on health grounds. And then for many whose crimes were not very serious and had served, more than half their term, we tried to get a lot of them out. And that was one of the biggest amnesties we did, and it helped to decongest the prisons. But the conditions in the cells were terrible. The ventilation is very poor, and the prison cells are overcrowded. I mean, a room that should take like 4 people, has about 10 people stuffed in there. And for those of us who have, asthma related diseases, I mean, some of us would die if we were ever locked in that cell because you won't be able to breathe, really. So, I mean, it's something that one takes seriously. After that prison visit, I asked for the building of a remand block, if you remember. And work started before I left office. I hear it stalled, but it's something that we should be able to do so that we move all the remand prisoners into that block so that it decongests the cells. And then we can even move some of the prisoners in there, take our time, and renovate those cells properly. They need better ventilation. There must be a way to get fresh air into those prisons, into those cells, And then also they have an infirmary that is nothing to write home about. I think even a school's clinic is much better than the Sawam infirmary that I saw. So you're preaching to the converted when you talk about prison reform of prison conditions. Remand prisoners are the most worrisome, and we've all supported that Justice for All program where judges go to the prisons and listen to some of the remand cases and deal with them expeditiously. And so those are all things that we support, and we think it should be done. With the appointment of a chief inspector, I think that we have Charge is responsible for those things because Charge is responsible for human rights. And so I think that the Commission on Human Rights and Administration Justice should visit the prisons from time to time and write an annual report on the state of the prisons. Charge does its reports on human rights in Ghana. I do think that prisons should become an important part of that work that they do and visit the prisons, make recommendations for government to improve conditions there.